Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're really diving into probably the most fundamental challenge for Web3 infrastructure. How do smart contracts actually get reliable, real-world data, without breaking that core promise of decentralization? We're focusing on a project called API3.
That's right. And API3, well, they're not just tinkering with the Oracle problem. They're proposing something pretty radical, like a complete re-engineering of the whole data supply chain. Our sources are showing this really unique approach. It's all about cutting out the traditional middleman. So our mission today is to understand how this shift could create not just better security, but also, and this is the surprising part, maybe a whole new way for dApps to generate revenue.
Okay, yeah, let's unpack that a bit.
Yeah.
Because if I'm running, say, a lending protocol, why can't I just, plug into a regular Bloomberg feed or something? Why is this isolated bubble such a big headache?
Well, the contract lives on the blockchain, right? And the data, the prices, the weather info, whatever it is, lives off the blockchain. Smart contracts need that external data for almost everything useful. Think price feeds for liquidations, insurance needing weather data, prediction markets needing election results. But they're fundamentally cut off from that outside world. It's like they're in a sealed room, so you need some kind of intermediary.
And that intermediary, that's the traditional Oracle model we hear about, the one most people use now.
Exactly.
Oh.
Think about the big players, the aggregator model. They use a decentralized network of node operators, usually anonymous. These operators, they pull data from various APIs out there. They kind of average it out or aggregate it, and then push that consensus value onto the blockchain.
Okay, so the path is data source def middleman, node def blockchain.
Yeah.
Got it. But what's the hidden danger in that middle step? Why is that risky?
Well, according to the sources, that middle step introduces some pretty expensive problems. First, there's what some call the middleman tax. You're paying potentially dozens of these anonymous nodes. That adds up. Costs go way up. Second, you create central points of failure. If that aggregator network somehow gets compromised or just goes down,
or the data stops flowing.
Exactly. Everything grinds to a halt. But maybe the most critical flaw, especially when you start thinking about big institutions getting involved, is the lack of data provenance. You get the data from the middleman network, sure, but you don't have a direct verifiable link back to the actual company or entity that created that data point. There's no real accountability if the data turns out to be wrong or manipulated. Who do you blame?
Right. Accountability. That seems key. So how does API3 plan to fix that? How do they get rid of that expensive, risky middle layer?
They propose cutting them out entirely, using what they call first-party oracles. The idea is actually pretty straightforward. The entity that produces the data, say a stock exchange, a big weather service, maybe a bank's API provider, they run the Oracle node themselves directly.
Okay, I think I need that analogy again. Make it simple for me.
All right, think about ordering food for a fancy restaurant. Quality control, right? The traditional way is like ordering, say, premium beef through 3 different delivery services. They all promise it's top-grade stuff. But if it shows up spoiled or it's mislabeled, the delivery guys just point fingers at each other.
Yeah.
You, the restaurant owner, have no idea who messed up. No recourse.
Okay.
With API3's first-party model, it's like you're ordering directly from the farm. The farm delivers the beef, and they put their official stamp on it. Think of it like a cryptographic signature. They're literally putting their business reputation on the line with that delivery.
I see.
If the steak is bad, everyone knows it was that farm. Their reputation tanks. You hold them directly accountable.
That economic pressure, the reputation risk, that feels like a much stronger guarantee than just paying anonymous nodes, doesn't it? But hang on, doesn't that create a new problem? If you're relying on just one big company, one source, like Bloomberg or whoever, running that oracle, isn't that a massive central point of failure? Maybe even worse than a network of middlemen.
That's a really good question, a common challenge to the model. And the sources, yeah, they address this. API3 still uses aggregation. It's not just one single source for critical data feeds. Individual first-party nodes, they call them air nodes, these are aggregated into what they term D-APIs, decentralized APIs. So you still get data from multiple sources, giving you that redundancy and resilience you need. But the key difference is every single data stream within that D-API comes directly from and is cryptographically signed by the original data provider. You know exactly who provided each piece of data.
Okay, so multi-source security, but with source transparency. No more anonymous middlemen.
Exactly. You get the best of both worlds, arguably. Security through multiple sources, accountability through direct sourcing.
Right, the philosophy makes sense. But thinking about those big traditional Web 2 companies, banks, data providers, running a crypto node, That sounds like a nightmare for their IT and compliance teams. They don't want to mess with crypto keys, manage blockchain stuff.
And that's precisely the problem Airnode is designed to solve. It's their core tech. They describe it as a lightweight, serverless API gateway for blockchains. The key part is serverless and lightweight. It's meant to be set and forget. The idea is an IT department can deploy it within their standard corporate cloud setup like AWS Lambda or Google Cloud without needing specialized blockchain engineers or infrastructure. Minimal friction is the goal.
Okay, but what about friction like money, accounting, pushing data on-chain cost gas fees, right? Why would a huge conservative company with super strict accounting want to start buying and holding Ether just to pay transaction fees? That sounds like a non-starter.
It absolutely is a massive compliance headache. And the sources highlight this. The protocol is specifically engineered so that the DApp, the entity that's actually requesting and using the data, is the one responsible for covering all the gas costs. The data provider, the big Web2 company, they don't have to touch crypto. They don't have to hold volatile assets. It sidesteps those huge accounting and compliance hurdles. They just offer their API, maybe priced in dollars or euros like they normally would. Makes it much more feasible for them to participate.
And thinking about those big companies, especially global ones, I remember reading something important about compliance, particularly in Europe.
Yes, absolutely critical for institutional adoption. Airnode was actually the first Oracle node tech to pass a full audit specifically for GDPR compliance. That was back in early 2021.
Wow, GDPR. That's a big one.
Huge. For any major company operating in or dealing with Europe, having that GDPR certification just removes a massive potential legal blocker to putting their data directly onto a blockchain.
Okay, this is starting to paint a compelling picture. They cut costs by removing middlemen, they lower risk through transparency, they ease compliance with Airnode and GDPR. But here's where you said it gets really interesting. How do they flip this? How does an Oracle, which is usually just an expense, become a potential profit center?
Right, this is the economic game changer. It's enabled by their Oracle Extractable Value OEV network. It launched this year in 2024. To get OEV, we probably need to quickly touch on MEV, Maximal Extractable Value.
Yeah, please do. That term gets thrown around, but maybe a quick refresher.
Sure thing. So MEV, basically, it's the profit that sophisticated traders or bots can make by exploiting the order of transactions within a blockchain block. Like if they see a huge trade coming that will move a price, they can quickly jump in front of it, front running, or execute an arbitrage trade based on the price impact before anyone else. It's about extracting value from transaction ordering.
Got it. Exploiting information in the transaction queue. So how does an Oracle update fit into that?
Well, certain Oracle updates are incredibly time-sensitive and create immediate, predictable profit opportunities. Think about a lending protocol. If an Oracle suddenly updates a collateral price sharply downwards, it triggers liquidations. Those liquidations are often profitable for whoever executes them first. Before OEV, that value, that profit from acting on the Oracle update, was mostly captured by random MEV bots or maybe the block producers, not the dApp itself. API3 saw this leakage. The OEV network essentially lets the dApp auction off the right to perform that specific valuable Oracle update and capture the associated profit.
Wait, so the dApp basically says, okay, this price update is about to trigger a bunch of profitable liquidations. Who wants to pay us for the privilege of executing it?
That's pretty much the idea. And the sources show the results, the revenue generated from that auction, potentially up to 90% of the profit made from the OEV opportunity, goes directly back to the dApp using the API3 Oracle. It completely flips the script. The Oracle isn't just a cost anymore, it's generating income.
That really is compelling, turning data infrastructure into a revenue stream. That's powerful. Can you give me that concrete example again, the financial one?
Absolutely. The sources point to Yay Finance, a lending protocol. Apparently, they generated over $80,000 in income just through June 2025 by using the OEV network.
$80,000 from their Oracle.
From their Oracle feed enabling these OEV opportunities. Imagine that an infrastructure piece that used to cost you money now potentially brings in 5 figures a month. That creates a really strong, almost irresistible economic pull for DeFi protocols, especially large ones paying hefty Oracle fees currently.
Okay, well, before we move to who's actually using this, one more thing on the mechanism. If the accountability relies on the data provider's reputation, what happens if something does go wrong? Is there a financial backstop, like insurance?
Yes, there is. It's called the service coverage mechanism. Think of it as on-chain insurance. It's backed by a pool of staked API3 tokens. If a DAPI, one of those aggregated data feeds fails, maybe it provides inaccurate data or it's significantly delayed, and that failure causes provable financial harm to a user or a protocol, that user can file a claim. These claims are then arbitrated by Claros, which is a well-known decentralized court or dispute resolution system. If Claros rules in favor of the claimant, compensation is paid out directly from that staking pool, so it ties the DAO's capital, the staker's money, directly to ensuring data quality.
Okay, so there's a real financial penalty for bad data handled decentrally. Makes sense. All right, so we have lower costs, better compliance, and potential revenue generation. Who's actually signing up? Is API3 making a dent against the big incumbent?
Well, they are definitely growing, particularly positioned as the choice for more institutionally minded players. The sources mentioned they currently secure around $400 million in TVS.
Just quickly remind us TVS.
Right, TVS is total value secured. It's basically the amount of money, the dollar value of crypto assets that rely on that protocol working correctly. So in this case, $400 million worth of assets are depending on API3's data feeds for things like liquidations, pricing, and general operation.
Got it. $400 million secured. Thanks. What about those institutional nods?
Yeah, the growth seems underpinned by some pretty serious names getting involved. We saw Nomura's Laser Digital, that's the crypto division of the huge Japanese investment bank. Nomura, they invested in API3's strategic funding round in 2024. That's significant validation. But maybe the most eye-catching partnership mentioned is API3's role in a 10-year deal involving the Central Bank of El Salvador. They're working with the Open Bank project to integrate over 400 traditional banking APIs with Web3 tech. API3 is providing the Oracle infrastructure for that.
Wow, the Central Bank of El Salvador. Connecting legacy banking APIs directly to Web3 via API3. That's major validation. Okay, but let's put on the critical hat. What are the big risks here? If this model seems so much better economically and compliance-wise, why hasn't everyone switched already?
The elephant in the room is definitely Chainlink dominance. Chainlink has, tens of billions in TVS, a huge market cap, first mover advantage, and just an overwhelming network effect. They're the default, the established giant. And often in tech, especially in crypto, the market prefers the good enough and already working solution over something potentially better but newer or perceived as more complex. Inertia is powerful.
And what about that OEV model? If it's such a killer feature, couldn't Chainlink or someone else just copy it?
That's a really interesting strategic point. It seems API3's ability to capture OEV effectively is quite tightly linked to its first-party architecture. Having that direct, transparent line from the data source gives them more granular control and insight into the data flow, which is needed to structure these OEV auctions efficiently. It might be structurally harder or less efficient for the traditional aggregator models with their layers of independent node operators to replicate that same level of OEV capture and redirection back to the dApp. API3 is essentially betting that this economic advantage is unique enough and powerful enough to overcome Chainlink's incumbency.
Okay, besides the giant competitor, what other risks are specific to API3's approach based on the sources?
Two key ones stand out. First is adoption risk. Their entire model hinges on convincing potentially thousands of traditional, often very conservative Web2 companies, many of whom might be skeptical or even hostile towards crypto, to run an air node. That's not just a tech challenge. It's a massive, ongoing B2B sales and marketing effort. It requires building trust and relationships with a world that doesn't always overlap with crypto. The second risk is tokenomics risk. The API3 token itself faces some headwinds. There's built-in inflationary pressure from staking rewards, the sources mention around 4.3% APY currently, which increases the circulating supply over time. Plus, like many projects, there are scheduled token unlocks for the team and early investors. While a lot is already circulating, these continued gradual releases can create persistent selling pressure on the token price.
I saw they're also looking ahead, focusing on specific future growth areas like staking data.
Yes, that seems to be a key part of their roadmap for 2026, focusing on delivering high-value data feeds for LSTs and LRTs.
And just to clarify again, LST is liquid staking tokens, like wrappers for staked ETH, and LRT is liquid restaking tokens, the next evolution. That whole area is basically the cutting edge of DeFi innovation and value right now, so focusing data services there makes a lot of strategic sense.
Absolutely. They're positioning themselves right where the next wave of high-value, complex data streams is likely to emerge in DeFi.
Okay, so let me try to wrap this up for listeners. API3 is essentially making a big bet that transparency, knowing your data source, regulatory readiness, like that GDPR compliance, and crucially, actual revenue generation via OEV will ultimately win over the big institutional players and large dApps, even against a massive incumbent like Chainlink.
That's the core thesis, yeah. API3 seems to be the first to really try and turn Oracle infrastructure from just a necessary cost into a potential profit center. That economic flywheel, if it works at scale, could be incredibly attractive, especially for large DeFi protocols currently spending significant amounts on data feed fees.
This is a great point to quickly pause and remind our listeners of something.
That's right. If you're enjoying how we break down these complex projects into simple pieces and want more reviews just like this, make sure you subscribe to our channel, CryptoBox. We do all the complex research, so you don't have to. So, as we finish up here, let me leave you with a final thought to chew on. API3's whole strategy really hangs on one big assumption, that eventually regulators and major financial institutions will prioritize accountability and transparency, knowing the verifiable source of their data over the anonymity offered by some other models. If that prediction turns out to be right, then things like Airnode's GDPR compliance and those partnerships with Nomura and the Central Bank of El Salvador, well, they position API3 perhaps not just as another Oracle competitor, but maybe as the essential bridge. The bridge between the highly regulated, compliance-driven world of traditional finance and the future of Web3. So the question becomes, what kind of super strict, verifiable data demands will that next wave of institutional capital bring when it truly enters DeFi? And who is best set up right now to meet them?